Welcome. I'm Sebastian Mahfood, and you're listening to WCAT Radio, the on-air wing of En Route Books and Media, bringing you the dulcet sounds of Catholic wisdom.
Hello, this is Ray Gerard. Welcome to another edition of St. Paul's Letters to America. This is the program that imagines, what if St. Paul were alive today? What if, looking at what is happening in our country today, he could write a letter to America? What would he tell us? Well, here on this program, we give you precisely such a letter. We then utilize that letter for an in-depth discussion of an issue that is current in our lives and our society today. We'll look at it through the eyes of St. Paul. As we discuss these matters, we always bear a motto in mind: love and kindness through the light of truth. And hopefully that is what we do here today. Now, for our program this time, we are taking up a new song by Madonna, and it is called God Control. We're not going to specifically be talking about religion and politics today, but we are going to be talking about our culture. And the letter that we are going to utilize from St. Paul to America would read like this. If then you were raised with Christ, seek what is above, where Christ is seated at the right hand of God. Think of what is above, not of what is on earth. For you have died, and your life is hidden with Christ in God. When Christ your life appears, then you too will appear with him in glory. Put to death then the parts of you that are earthly: immorality, impurity, passion. Now you must put them all away: anger, fury, malice, since you have taken off the old self with its practices and have put on the new self, which is being renewed in the image of its Creator. Here there is not black or white, rich or poor, friend or enemy, but Christ is all and in all. Put on then, as God's chosen ones, holy and beloved, heartfelt compassion, kindness, humility, gentleness, and patience, bearing with one another and forgiving one another. If one has a grievance against another, as the Lord has forgiven you, so you must also do. And over all these, put on love, that is, the bond of perfection. And let the peace of Christ control your hearts, the peace into which you were also called in one body. And be thankful. Let the word of Christ dwell in you richly. Whatever you do in word or in deed, do everything in the name of the Lord Jesus, giving thanks to God the Father through him. Now, if St. Paul were to write this letter to the Americans, as he did to the Colossians, although we changed just a few words and took out certain parts here and there, just brief pieces being excerpted so that the whole letter was abbreviated a little. But essentially this does represent the very ideas and thoughts and beliefs of St. Paul. And it could easily be addressed to us in America. And what does this message tell us? This message tells us a number of things. One, think not of what is on earth. Don't have your thoughts and your worries and your concerns and your desires be focused on what is on earth. Why? Because there is a reality that transcends what is on earth. And if we're not focused on that transcendent reality, then we're not focused on reality. 2, put aside the things that are earthly. He reiterates his message here to us, to put aside the things that are earthly. First, we need to think about what is transcendent, and second, in our actions, we can't be simply restricted to the things that are of this earth. Put on heartfelt compassion. That's a strange kind of phrase, is it not? Put it on. Put on compassion. He also tells us to put on love, which is the bond of perfection. What's he talking about? We need to basically adopt a new self. We need to become new persons. And why not? Christ died for us, creating a whole new world, a whole new age, a whole new reality. So we need to coordinate ourselves with that new reality created by Christ. I mean, God comes to this earth, dies for our sins. Such an intimate, self-sacrificing act of love that unites the divine with us. It transforms the history of the world. It transforms everything. We have to unite with it. And how do we do that? We need to become new selves. We need to put on compassion. This is not simply a feeling, but it is something that defines who we are. We need to put it on. We need to live it. And of course, if we do that, if we put on compassion, then we're also putting on love. And love is the bond of perfection. It is the glue that forms the ties between people. We all live our own lives. We all live in our own little bubbles. We can be extremely close with our spouses, with our loved ones, with whoever that we're close with. But no matter how close we get with another human person, to some extent, we are all still isolated. But there is something that ties us together. There's something that transcends our isolation. And it is a transcendence from person to person, uniting everybody on this planet. That comes how? That is not something that can be created simply of our own doing. We need to rely on a force, an energy that exists in that gap between us. We need to rely on God. And that bond is love. We can be tied to one another through love. And if we do that, then we are relying on God, who is love. And God is perfection, and that is what St. Paul is talking about. We put on love, we put on compassion, we get united with those around us through love. We have a bond we have a bond between us that relies on God, who is perfect, the bond of perfection. And he says we need to be controlled by the peace that we have in Christ. If we are united with each other through love, we will feel peace. That is the peace of Christ. The peace of knowing that He came, that He loves us, that He's willing to welcome us, that He died for our sins, that He is ultimate mercy, that He will forgive us if simply we ask. Why not? I mean, He went through the horrific experience of actually dying for us. He will forgive. There's tremendous peace in that, and that's what we are to be controlled by. And we've already alluded to this somewhat, but he speaks of the one body that exists through Christ. He does love all of us. He's the God for all of us. We make up one body if we unite with one another through Him. And then lastly, thanks to God in everything. We're circling back to where we began. Think of what is above. If we think of what is above, we acknowledge God. And if we do that, we can do nothing but feel thanks to Him. Once we realize what Christ has done for us, we can do nothing but feel thanks to Him. And that gratitude, that also helps create this feeling of peace. You know, we can't be giving thanks to God Almighty without realizing what He did for us. If we realize what He did for us, we can't help but give thanks. It's a consistent picture. Well, against that picture, we have a different one. We said we were going to use the writings of St. Paul to engage in an in-depth discussion of something in our culture today. Well, something in our culture today is a new song that came out from Madonna. And I understand this album that she's got, the new album she's got out called Madam X, is a woman, she's 60 years old, still creative, still publishing albums that apparently are at the top on one rating system. I saw it was it's listed as the number one album in some group on Billboard. She is still producing very popular work. And one of the songs on this new album called Madam X, a name apparently that relates to when she was in dance school, and she was very, as she has been for the rest of her life, iconoclastic, breaking the mold, doing things that were outside the norm, and apparently her instructor called her Madam X. In any event, one of the songs on this new album is called God Control. And like a lot of her work, you have to, it creates questions as to what exactly she means. And let's take a look at a few of the lyrics of this song and see if we can do a little bit of that searching into what she's trying to say. Part of the lyrics include, get the kids ready, take them to school, everybody knows they don't have a chance. There is a music video that was released in connection with this song. It is a horrific video. It is a video that is preceded by a message, words in white letters on a black screen saying, this is a disturbing video. You may not want to watch it. If you do, be prepared. This is a warning. And when you watch the video, what you see is a very true-to-life, explicit, horrifying rendition of the mass shooting at the Pulse nightclub in Orlando. Apparently a bar that catered to gay and alternative lifestyles, as the social term is used today. And somebody went in there and shot and killed a large number of people. It horrified, of course, the country. And just it's this idea. So this song is devoted to this idea of mass shootings, this idea of gun violence. Where does this come from? Why do people do these things? How can we get our head around such horrific acts that seem to have no motive? The people that are being shot have no real connection often enough to the shooter. They haven't done anything to the shooter. They are simply innocent victims. Why? And what can we do about it? And the song is all about what can we do about it. In any event, as I said, the lyrics include this business references to school shootings. Poor kids don't have a chance. And then making a social commentary, a commentary on our government, she talks about, when they talk reforms, it makes me laugh. They pretend to help. Her social message is coming up. What can we do about it? She also says, blood of innocence spread everywhere. They say that we need love, but we need more of this. And then the song breaks into a choir, and it's a choir of children. And it is a choir. It's in a church. The video from the nightclub shooting scene changes. And what you see is a full-screen image of a statue of the Blessed Virgin Mary. The Virgin Mary. This is not unusual for Madonna. She and why not? In one of her songs, an image of the Blessed Virgin Mary. This is, after all, a woman who calls herself Madonna. And I got to tell you, personally, I had a certain repulsion to any work that she did, that she's done, any songs, any music, anything that she's ever done, simply because of the fact that she chooses to call herself Madonna. That, in and of itself, seems to be blasphemous, especially when you consider that a lot of her work has included imagery that is, in many people's minds, and in many people's, I think, rightful judgment, sacrilegious in a lot of contexts. She prides herself on being provocative, and she is nothing if she is not that. But in any event, in this particular video, there's a full-screen image of a statue of the Blessed Virgin Mary. So, on the heels of seeing all these people shot, now we turn to our Blessed Mother. And our thoughts and our reactions could then follow a certain path from here. The path, however, and this is the difference between the path charted by St. Paul and the path charted by the social message being given by Madonna. And like I said, this is a message that will affect a lot of people. This is an album that is number one on the Billboard charts. She has sold, there are numbers on her. She's as a female artist, I think she's sold the second most albums of anybody. I think there's like 300 records. I think she sold like 300 million records worldwide, 65 million albums in the U.S. I mean, she has broken all these records, or at the top of all these records for success in pop music. Her message is being heard by millions, and that is why we're talking about it here, because it is important to consider what it is she's saying. And so let's proceed with pointing out the difference between the message of St. Paul and the message being given by Madonna. So we're in this video, and we are looking at an image of the Blessed Virgin Mary. Well, the camera angle pans out, it spreads out, it becomes wider, and what do we see? We see a church. And what's in the church? Coffins. A row of coffins. And it seems that a listener, a viewer of this might likely be led to think, why? Why? If there is a God, if there is a Blessed Mother, who cares? And the statue of the Virgin Mary that is picked for this seems to have a countenance, the face of the Blessed Virgin seems to have a countenance of concern, of sorrow, of compassion and love. Why? I mean, if she cares for the people that have died, why is this even allowed? It could lead a lot of people into a not uncommon type of thought, type of reaction, which would be simply to criticize God. It is it is an age-old question. Why does God allow such suffering in the world? Is he really a caring God? This is a question and a reflection, and it can easily be a criticism. It can easily lead people to harbor some feelings of dissatisfaction with God, or worse, to lead people to question whether or not there really is a God. Because if there really was, he would not allow this. Therefore, since this is allowed, he's probably not there. These are the messages that, if they're not intended, could easily be created by this video and this song. Well, as I said, this is followed by a choir. And it's a choir of children in a church. And the choir sings a refrain. And the refrain is, We have lost gun control. Now, the title of the song is God Control, but the refrain in the song, as you see it printed out in the video, the actual words of this refrain are seen on screen images where they're printed out, and it says gun control. The official website for Madonna, in its discussion of this song, it includes the lyrics, and the lyrics that are printed on Madonna's website say gun control. The webpage, however, introduces its discussion of the song by saying, Madonna today unveiled a powerful video for God control. God control. Now, it's kind of funny because the song title is God Control, but nowhere in the song, according to these lyrics published on her site, do the words God Control ever appear. Now, most songs, you might have to wait until later on in the song, midway, or maybe three-quarters of the way through. But at some point, if it's not at the very beginning, at some point you're going to find the words of the title. It's going to the song title is going to be included. It's not included here. Gun control is substituted. It's also funny because if you go on to if you did a search for the lyrics on Google and you come up with Google's version of the lyrics, Google's version says God control. We have lost God control. That's what's stated to be in the lyrics for this refrain. So there is a confusion, is there not? But nevertheless, let's take Madonna as the word given through her website, which is gun control. The point I'm simply making is, it seems like God control and gun control are conflated. They're equated. They're used to refer to basically the same thing. And there was a writer of an article reviewing the song who basically said the same thing. Said that Madonna presents the viewpoint that God would approve gun control, that the Creator wants gun control legislation. For Madonna to come out with such an idea is not so far-fetched. She was quoted in another article, another interview as saying, or an interview as saying, that Jesus, if he were here, would approve of abortion. Why? Because, well, Jesus cares about women, and of course he would have sympathy for a woman's right to choose. Well, we play a dangerous game, do we not? When we think of what God would think. It is always said that God's thinking, it's written in the Bible, that God's thinking is far above our type of thinking. And yet, it's very tempting to think that God would think the way we do. We put our thinking onto him instead of trying to surrender our own egos and views and open our hearts and minds to things that maybe are not comfortable to us, things that might be the way that God thinks about things. And, of course, it's funny for someone to say that Jesus would approve of abortion. Jesus, part of the Trinity, the one who was there at the creation of the world, God himself, to not care about the unborn, not care about the people that he knew before they were born, the people who he knew by name before they were born. How could he not? How could he not? So if she can hold that opinion, then why not think that God would also approve gun control legislation? And that's what the song is all about. That's what we need, gun control legislation. The song is replete with lyrics about wake up, wake up. You know, we need gun control legislation. This is what we need to do. She also, in this song, God Control, calls for, in these lyrics, a new democracy. God and pornography, a new democracy. She is famous for, in her various songs, juxtaposing and combining the religious and the sexual. She thinks that sex is not a bad thing, and that before there was the Old Testament, if you go back to the Jews and in the Muslim faith, apparently, according to her, sex and religion go together just fine, and there's no problem with this. And so she makes a practice of this, and she brings this, makes a practice of preaching this, and she brings that into this song as well. That's her vision of a new democracy. The song lyrics also contain another interesting passage. She says, "It's a weird kind of energy, a bizarre thing that happens to be, an abnormal fraternity, and I feel more than sympathy. We need to wake up, wake up, wake up." She is describing some feeling that she has, which is more than sympathy, a bizarre kind of thing. It's a weird energy. We spoke before about that bond of perfection between all people that ties us together through Christ, the body of Christ. St. Paul talks about, the letter that we just read earlier, talks about this bond of perfection, that we are one body through Christ. He says that in the letter we just started this program with. Could she be talking about that? Could she be feeling that weird kind of energy? When she talks about more than sympathy, sympathy for who? Something deeper than sympathy, but this feeling of compassion, love, for who? Is it for the victims? Is it for the shooter? We don't know. But she, this is just an example of something that you see over and over again in her work. She's confused by religion. She doesn't quite know what to make of it. But the message, before we get on to that, the message is quite clear in this video. We need legislation. We need a law. The law will fix this. We need to wake up. And if we need to wake up, we need a law. Well, I submit, St. Paul were here today, he'd voice a different opinion. He would tell us something else. He'd say, no, you need to wake up. You need more God. The end of her video, and if I can find it, but the end of this video contains a strange reversal of the Serenity Prayer. Now, the Serenity Prayer, of course, well, not of course, but the Serenity Prayer is credited to Reinhold Niebuhr. And, of course, the prayer that he created or wrote was, God, grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. Well, near the very end of this music video, there's another screen, a black screen with a series of white letters. This is a quote from Dr. Angela Davis. Now, Dr. Angela Davis, she's now a professor at a college in California. She was known as a political activist back in the 60s, 70s, and apparently was complicit in getting guns to people who took over a courtroom in a certain trial and kidnapping the judge. The judge apparently got killed. Other people were killed. She fought for black rights, but she also was very controversial in some of her methods. And there's so many of these professors at these colleges that are so troubling. There is never, never, never any excuse if we even pretend to be following Christ, to be engaged in violence, causing the deaths of other people. But nevertheless, Dr. Angela Davis is quoted at the end of this music video by Madonna. The quote she gives, I am no longer accepting the things I cannot change. I am changing the things I cannot accept. What a proclamation for the glory of the self. The glory of the self. We need more God. No, we need more about what we think, what we cannot accept. We're not, we're no longer going to accept these things I cannot change. Reinhold Niebuhr turned to God. God, there are things I cannot change. Just grant me the serenity to accept them. The peace that St. Paul was talking about. Madonna also has something called her Ray of Light Foundation. It's devoted to a revolution of love. She talks about peace and equality. According to Reinhold Niebuhr, we have peace by just trusting that God is in control, that there are things we cannot change, but it's in God's hands, and we can rest in that, just to be tranquil in that. The message from Angela Davis is, no, what I cannot accept, we're going to change. Well, what if other people feel differently than you do, and they have a different view of what should or should not be changed? Well, now there's confrontation between people. Reinhold Niebuhr says, forgo the confrontation. Feel peace and serenity through God. The message here? No, don't do that. The message here obviously leads to confrontation. Another divergence here between the messages we have from people who follow Christ, from people who have read, as Reinhold Niebuhr obviously did, read the writings of St. Paul and obviously agreed with them on many levels. What a difference between that message and this one. This music video fails in what it can do. It reaches millions of impressionable people, millions of young people, and the message it gives is turn to earthly things, wake up, insist on legislation, and work on the things, determine the things that you decide you cannot accept. Don't be tolerant of other viewpoints of people or what have you, all in the name of being tolerant towards other people, and instead insist on certain things. Well, this is all well and good. I mean, the idea for gun control legislation has a noble purpose. The people are rightly aghast at these shootings of innocent people, and something's got to change. That's a very understandable position. But you can create a law. You can write something in a statute book. But until you change the hearts of people, have you really done anything? St. Paul says, put on heartfelt compassion. We need to change us. It is easily to be considered. It is something that is rightly thought of as something that cannot be ignored. To consider that this increase in these mass shootings is occurring at a time when we are turning away from God. We have less and less God. We have more and more laws, but less and less God. We are taking God out of our schools. We're taking God out of our public discourse. We are forcing the things that we cannot accept on other people, like the Little Sisters of the Poor, by forcing them to fund in certain ways abortion. We're becoming intolerant. We're becoming more confrontational. We're accepting less and less God, and we're having more and more confrontation, more and more violence, more and more killing of innocents, and we wonder why. It's funny, the lyrics of this song talk about the fact that everybody knows the, damn truth. Our nation lies, we've lost respect. She says, everybody knows the truth. Really. It It is staring us right in the face. It is right there for us all to see. We have less and less God. The answer is more God. It's very simple. He is the answer to everything. Why is he not the answer to this as well? And I've got another idea. What if Madonna did a different kind of video? What if, for example, she did a video where there was a shooting in a nightclub? And what if, we did have an image of the cross? In this music video, as I said, there's an image of the Blessed Virgin. Well, there's also an image of God on the cross. She has put the cross into stage performances. She did a tour she called the Confessions Tour. I said before that she uses a lot of religious imagery in her art, and this is another example of it. She was, in fact, raised Catholic. She lost her mother at a very young age. She was only 5 years old. Her mother died at age 30 from cancer. And that, according to a lot of what she says in a number of interviews, had a really pivotal effect on her. She says she did not have a mother to tell her, no, you shouldn't do this, shouldn't do that. And then her father, I think 3 years after she lost her mother, married the housekeeper. And apparently her and her other siblings kind of rejected that, kind of rebelled against that, didn't want to accept that. Madonna herself, apparently as a young girl, after she lost her mother, would sleep next to her father, close to her father, because she couldn't go to sleep otherwise. And she was afraid, and this is psychologically understandable, that her father might die too. Her father might be taken away from her too. And so she had to sleep close to him because that's the only way she could go to sleep. So then when the father married the housekeeper, it was something that was not easily accepted, so she rejected it. And that apparently had a lot to do with her being very rebellious at school. She was an A student through high school, ended up dropping out of college, but by all accounts was smart and got very good grades, but also very rebellious. Seemed to, in an interview she gave, she said she was always this way, and she can't help it. But she was always provocative. She wanted to do things that would shock people to some degree, or to a large degree. And so that's just who she is. And that apparently might have a lot to do with the fact that, she lost her mother at a young age. So this is, so she has included Catholic imagery in a lot of what she does, precisely to provoke. She uses crosses. She says she likes the crosses. She likes the fact that Jesus was a rabble-rouser. He offended a lot of people because he spread a radical message that you had to love your neighbor. He spread a radical message that you had to accept everybody. He accepted taxpayers, beggars, prostitutes, not just the respectable people, but the sinners. He came for sinners. She likes that about him. She says she has a sentimental view of the cross because it represents Christ who did this provocative rabble-rousing, a like heart, a similarly rebel heart. That was the name of another tour that she gave, by the way, the Rebel Heart Tour. Anyways, she performed a song on stage during her Confessions Tour. I think this was about 10 years ago, where the stage goes black, and then a light shines on a cross that is rising. And it's a cross that is made up of tiles like you would see at a disco. And affixed to the cross is Madonna herself. And she is wearing a crown of thorns. The cross is raised up until it becomes vertical, and she performs a song affixed to the cross. She had another, back in the 80s, she had a song that caused a lot of consternation, caused a lot of ridicule, and caused her to be rebuked a lot. It was called Like a Prayer. it refers to God calling her by name, and that's like a prayer, and she's in a church. There's a statue. It's all about racial injustice. And there's a statue of a saint, and he's black. Some people think it's St. Martin de Porres. Anyways, she proceeds to have romantic, the statue comes alive, and she proceeds to engage in some romantic physical interaction with this now living saint. And it's this connection of love and religion. Again, we mentioned that earlier, that she likes to put those two together. And that sense of love spurred her to do the right thing. The video shows a black man being arrested. Black man has the same face as the saint that came alive. This black man's in jail. She proceeds to go to the police station, secures his release from jail. So it is the stimulus of love for this person that prompts her to do the right thing as a white person helping a black person. So there are good parts to the message, but the idea of engaging in physical, male-female type loving, interaction in a church obviously disturbed a lot of people. I think it was condemned by the Vatican. She's been condemned by the Vatican a lot. She herself says she's been excommunicated 3 times. Hard to understand why the church would excommunicate anybody more than once. I think once would be enough. But she claims anyway she's been excommunicated 3 times. Don't know exactly what she means by that, but whatever. So she's always had this sort of love-hate relationship with the Catholic Church. She was raised Catholic. Her father was strict. She talks about the rules of being Catholic, and rules, of course, something she rebelled against. But nevertheless, she has this strange connection to all things Catholic. She can't seem to let it go. Andrew Greeley wrote an article in a Jesuit periodical back in 1989. I think it was reviewing this particular song, Like a Prayer, that we just talked about. And he talks about the fact that she has a God hunger. And I guess that's a good way to describe it. She can't seem to let it go. There's something, the song starts with this reference to God calling her by name. There's some calling there that she can't seem to let go of. Now, in a recent interview she gave, she talks about the fact that she's not Catholic. She doesn't consider herself Christian. She has studied the Muslim faith with a Muslim scholar. She has studied an ancient mystical form of Judaism called Kabbalah, I believe. Studied that. She claims that she likes to get to the truth that is deeper than religion, that she sees the things, the common thread that connects all religion, that she, and how she practices her life, takes parts of what is Catholic, what is Christian, what is Jewish, what is Islamic, that she takes all of these, and yet she said she doesn't believe in the afterlife. She says that her art will give her a certain sense of immortality. She says that the energy that we put into things we do on this earth, the little revolutions that we create on this earth, the things that we do to help people on this earth, those will live on in other people, and her art will live on. And that's how she will attain a certain sense of immortality, and that's what gives her solace. Well, obviously, she cannot see the same thing that St. Paul does. St. Paul, the letter that we gave at the beginning, said, don't think of what is on this earth. Think of what is above. There was a man named Christ. He died for your sins. He rose from the dead. That's simply not done very often. Like, for example, for instance, like maybe once in all of human history. Why? Because he comes from God, because he is God. It's very simple. The truth is right in front of us, only it's a different kind of truth. And so, in any event, this is why her video fails. It stops short. She cannot give a message that goes farther than what is on this earth. She cannot give a message that goes farther than, hey, we need to pass a new law. Why? Because she does not see farther than that. But she has this strange hunger. These things won't go away. And maybe that's part of the reason for her rebellion. She uses religious symbols, crosses, like I said, including a cross. Having yourself affixed to a cross. And did I mention before that she was wearing a mock crown of thorns in that performance? I guess it was a regular feature of her performance during that whole tour. But if I didn't, I'll mention it now. She was wearing what looked like a crown of thorns. Provocative. Why? Why do this? Takes the name Madonna. To make the sacred profane in a way. So there's something that's still eating at her, gnawing at her. And perhaps it's because she doesn't accept it fully, that it does gnaw at her. And that perhaps is the reason why she does rebel. She needs to justify what she does. And so she provokes, she ridicules, she mocks. So it's a strange kind of a combination. She says a lot of things. She often says a lot of things that are agreeable to people of faith. She talks about the service to humanity, that creates a purpose in life. She talks about treating all people equally, no matter, what sphere you come from, no matter, what color your skin may be. She talks about peace and love and equality, and she talks about, devoting herself to the service of humanity now. I mean, these are all things that people of faith can easily agree with. She says a lot of good things. She spreads a lot of good messages. But she can't bring herself to the point of expressing the ultimate message, the real message, the only real message that will make all those others work. It's a weird kind of energy, something more than sympathy. Yeah, we are all tied together. There is a weird kind of energy. It's God. She can't recognize it. She dabbles in it. But we don't have to, fail in that same regard. We know the truth. We know what the reality is. And we need to say it. We need to spread the message. It is unfortunate that her message reaches so many millions of people. And they're perhaps led similarly to think that provocative sex, promiscuous sex, is fine. God and pornography. Well, no. They can never go together. St. Paul also says the flesh has desires against the spirit, and the spirit against the flesh. There's a lot of talk about the ordination of female priests these days. Well, the church has been the one stalwart, the one religion that has maintained this principle announced by St. Paul, that the spirit has desires against the flesh. There's been a lot of talk of allowing priests to marry. The spirit has desires against the flesh. If we are devoted to the spirit, we separate ourselves from the desires of the flesh. Now, we all can't do that. But even in our married life, we can try to maintain that so that it is not an unnatural kind of love that we engage in, but a love rooted in the love of God, love of people, love of God. They can take different forms, but they can all be focused on the love of God. Promiscuous sex, obviously, does not do that. It doesn't consider what is above. Madonna, in a lot of her performances, glorifies all kinds of sexual acts with all kinds of partners and people, multiple people is what I'm generally referring to here. Or it's actually, I mean, it's all I want to be referring to here. It's just the idea of having, sexual relations with multiple people. And the funny thing about it is Madonna says that she doesn't live her own life the way that, is reflected by her art, that she's very, very dull and square, actually. Don't know about that, but that's what she says. In any event, a lot of her messaging to young people is that promiscuous sex is okay. You can't be focused on the spirit if that's the case. And she's not focused on the spirit. She can't. She can't go that far. But it's something that gnaws at her. It's a hunger that she has of some sort. And that, I think, is indicative of a lot of people today. A lot of people today. And I said before, what if she did a different kind of video? Perhaps. What about doing a video that did go the extra mile, that did express the ultimate message? How about one where you have, in fact, a nightclub shooting, horribly but realistically depicted, and perhaps you had the players in it. Perhaps you had an image of Christ on the cross juxtaposed with that. Let's in fact juxtapose religious imagery in an artistic musical performance, but do it this way. Perhaps you have an image of Christ on the cross, and perhaps nobody's looking at him. And perhaps when each person is shot, he feels the pain of that sinful act. Perhaps there's a grimace. Perhaps there is a look of terrible sorrow on his face, as, of course, was on his face when he hung on the cross on this earth, because, of course, he felt the sins of humanity. But perhaps nobody is looking at him. And then perhaps we have something else. Perhaps we have, maybe, if this is going to be by Madonna, maybe it would be from a girl's perspective. Maybe we have a young girl who is looking at him. Perhaps she feels the same sorrow. And then perhaps she turns from that, from looking at the cross, and perhaps she goes among the wounded and helps them, helps to tend to their wounds, and helps to do that with a look of sorrow, feeling the pain that he feels on the cross, united with him, feeling that weird kind of energy that unites us all, something much deeper than just mere sympathy. Perhaps spurred by the love of God, she is called to do the right thing, to do kind and compassionate things, to put on heartfelt compassion. Now that would be a video mixing all of these messages from messages that have been included in the work of Madonna, messages that are reflected in the writings of St. Paul. But it would be focused on God. It would be focused on the truth. That would be a different kind of message. And what if that was seen by millions and millions of young people? What would they think? Could they not help but be affected? It's worth thinking about anyway. It's certainly worth thinking about anyway. So there you have it. A new music video put out by Madonna talking about gun laws, titled God Control, making the case apparently that God would want us to pass a new gun law, but not making the case that we should focus on God. Finding an answer in the acts of men on this earth, and finding an answer in earthly things, finding an answer in a new law, and not finding an answer where it really lies. The only place that can ever provide an end to this kind of horrible violence from some people to other people, the only thing that could provide an answer to all violence and anger between people all over, the only answer that exists for everything is God. So perhaps if you do happen to see this video or hear this song, you'll have a little bit more of a perspective on it. Perhaps you'll have a perspective on how it compares with the message of St. Paul. And perhaps you have found this discussion helpful, at least in some measure. We certainly hope so. And we thank you for listening, and we hope you will join us again for another edition of St. Paul's Letters to America. Thank you, and until then, till next time, God bless.
We hope you enjoyed the program and will join us back for another show on WCAT Radio. This is Sebastian Mahfood. Good day.